You are listening to the International Radio Report. Your reactions are much appreciated. Feel free to send them to radioreport@yahoo.com. That is, radioreport@yahoo.com. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone, to the International Radio Report for Sunday, June the 1st, 2025. My name's Sheldon. I am here with Gilles. We are here every Sunday morning at 10:30 Eastern, 14:30 UTC, with our 30 minutes of news and information from the world of radio. We have some local Montreal area news. We have some U.S. news and some South Pacific news for you on the show today. So we'll get started right away with our first local item. And we want to thank our friend Gilles Michaud for tipping us off to this one.
So I stumbled upon Gilles Michaud's post in the AM radio Facebook group where you were saying that he didn't hear CJLV 1570 in Laval in recent days. And I, of course, tuned during the day too, and of course they were still off the air as we are recording. And just before we recorded the show, we were looking at our webpage, and I came across a phone number, so I thought that we would actually call. And we did get a little bit of information that the transmitter is being repaired. It's off the air for now. They're not sure exactly when it's going to be back, but they said it's going to be at least a few days. So we'll see how long it takes, but it will eventually come back. Their streaming online works, so that at least shows that they're still doing some programming. It's one of those interesting stations that has a very unique format of music that you don't hear anywhere else on the band, that's for sure, with these oldies and a lot of francophone oldies of the 60s that everybody probably forgot they existed.
Yeah, it's interesting. The station's got a really interesting history, but not that long ago it was purchased by a group called Radio Humsafar, which has predominantly subcontinent native Indian programming, not Aboriginal programming, but language services from India and the subcontinent. They have other stations on as well. They operate the 1610 frequency here in Montreal with South Asian programming. They wanted this station to be an ethnic station full time, but they weren't permitted to do so by the CRTC. It's gone through a whole lot of different versions of the station over the years, but I guess its best years back a long time ago, 60s, when they were CKLM in Laval, and they were blasting away with 50 kilowatts in the daytime and down to 10 kilowatts at night. French language station, very popular and heard extremely well to the east of Montreal, right into the maritime provinces. And I know Gilles Michaud, his family was from Edmundston, New Brunswick, and they used to hear it there all the time. And you were talking to someone about it as well.
Yeah, there's a friend of mine that was born in Gaspé, which is the east end of the province of Quebec. And when he was a teenager, he would actually listen to some music on the AM station, kind of realizing when we were talking about it that it must have been 1570 CKLM. And I also remember as a teenager, I would call in. They had a request show, and I would call in almost every day to request a song to be played on the air. They were very powerful, and I was probably in the path of that signal because where I lived as a teenager, my radio were literally overloaded and blasted by that signal. It was just amazing.
Their transmitter and their license still indicates them being in Laval, which is the island north of Montreal Island. But their studios and station operations itself are actually in the suburb of LaSalle on the island of Montreal, which I'm assuming is where their 1610 location is as well. So when they were using 50 kilowatts CKLM, they had to reduce power at night to protect a station all the way down in Mexico, a very famous station, XERF. in Mexico, which when they did decrease their power at nighttime, we used to actually hear that station sometimes on good condition nights. So it's a really interesting history. If you want to look them up on Wikipedia, it's got the whole history there about the station, and they went through a lot of changes over the years.
Yep.
And now they're, as the gentleman said to you on the phone today, they're waiting for some parts to come in, and they hope to have the transmitter back on the air. So now's your opportunity. Go to 1570 and see what you can hear lurking underneath that station, because they didn't know at this point when they'll be back on the air.
So we have next a audio clip of Vermont's community radio stations that gets state funding for disaster response work. And this is from Vermont Public by Howard Weiss-Tisman. And let's listen to that audio clip.
Community radio is alive and well in Vermont. These small, low-powered stations are mostly run by volunteers and generally broadcast their signal within a 10 to 20-mile radius. They don't just provide music and entertainment. The stations also have an important public safety function. That's why, for the first time ever, lawmakers are sending state funds to community radio stations. Vermont Public's Howard Weiss-Tisman has more.
Well, we've done it again, my fellow woolies. We've managed to survive another 7 rotations of our small, warm, damp rock floating aimlessly out here in the cosmos.
It's just before 5 on a Friday afternoon at Wool Radio in Bellows Falls, and Evan Parks is behind the mixing board for his weekly radio show.
I'll be with you tonight, bringing you music both worldwide and local. It's Flocking Friday.
One look, give 'em whiplash. Beat drop with a big flash.
Parks is one of the 20 or so DJs at Wool Radio who volunteer their time to keep the station running. On his show, he plays worldwide pop music with a heavy focus on K-pop from South Korea.
I'm excited about community radio every single time I walk in the building, because this is really the voice of the people. This is our conduit to our friends and neighbors and, people that we love and people that we haven't met yet.
Parks is also on the tech team. He says he's got a little bit of experience working with electronic equipment, so when the transmitter needs attention up on the top of Mount Kilburn, he's one of the volunteers who goes up to fix it.
In the summer, we can drive up there, but in the winter, it's snowshoe only, so it can be a challenge.
There are 7 community radio stations in Vermont, including ones in Brattleboro, Warren, and South Royalton. Over the past 2 summers, when catastrophic flooding hit central Vermont, community radio stations played an important role in the disaster response.
There's no amount of training in the world that I think could have prepared anyone for what happened in the summer of 2023.
Lou Mulvaney-Stanek is the station manager at the community radio stations in Plainfield and Hardwick, towns that have seen 2 consecutive years of flooding.
And we kind of really just responded to the moment that first summer and stayed on the air, and were providing mutual aid information, real-time information that we knew that was true from the local community, because our people were coming from those communities.
Mulvaney-Stanek helped get a bill introduced in the legislature this year that provides $150,000 in public safety grants. The state money will go to the community radio stations, which primarily rely on listener donations since they're too small to get federal funding. Washington County Senator Andrew Perchlik, who lives within range of the Plainfield radio station, says it was important to keep the community radio funding in the budget, even in a year when money was extremely tight.
We had very bad floods in my district 2 years in a row. And yeah, this is a real thing. Having community radio during times of emergency is important.
There are 3 groups in the state that have recently applied for a license from the FCC to start a new community radio station. Organizations in Bristol, Ludlow, and Richmond all hope to have their new stations on the air in the next year or 2. Kate Blofson, who's working with the station in Richmond, says the state money will go a long way toward helping the group get the equipment it needs. She says there's a lot of support and enthusiasm for the new station.
I think part of the power of radio and community radio in particular is like the personal connection that it offers. It's not just like an algorithm, it's like a real human being. And I think people like real human beings.
The Richmond station, which will also reach parts of Underhill and Jericho, has an online station going now, and they're starting to raise the money they need to get their station on the air. For Vermont Public, I'm Howard Weiss-Tisman.
So it's actually a very interesting and very good idea to give some funding so that the stations could also be on the air in times of emergencies of all sorts. This is great and also keeps small, unique, very personalized radio stations on the air with their own unique programming.
I think this is more important than ever. I know I usually catch a U.S. Evening newscast every night from ABC News, and all we keep seeing is these storms that are just one after another crossing the United States. And right now, of course, it's tornadoes and it's rainstorms and flooding and wind and what have you. So having disaster relief information on the radio is certainly very important. So we're glad to hear that at least in Vermont, we're going to see them get some state funding. Federal funding, FEMA, those sorts of things right now, they're kind of all in limbo. We don't know what's going to continue and what's not. Even the NOAA weather services have been challenged by cuts right now. So to have something local in their area is certainly going to be important for them.
Yeah, definitely. Every time there's, bad weather, what goes down? Well, your electricity and very often your smartphone also. So radio is the thing to use and the best way to reach an audience when things go bad. So in our next story, there's a termination notices that expected to go out to all remaining Voice of America employees this week. This is by Ben Johansen, Politico. And so all the remaining staff at Voice of America are expected to receive reduction in force notices this week, likely closing the book on the network founded 80 plus years ago to combat Nazi disinformation during World War II. Employees are anticipating termination notices to go out this week to all full-time staff at the embattled news network. According to 4 VOA employees familiar with the situation, granted anonymity to discuss unannounced plans. Those terminations would affect the 800 remaining workers at the agency after nearly 600 VOA contractors were dismissed by the Trump administration earlier this month. Employees have been advised by management to expect termination notices in the coming days. A senior VOA employee told Politico that based on his team's conversations with staff at the U.S. Agency for Global Media, VOA's parent company, the notices will likely affect all staff, effectively shutting down the international broadcasting network. Human Resources at USAGM was told that reduction in force notices will likely go out as soon as Wednesday, according to another VOA employee. Thus far, USAGM has not responded to the union's demand to bargain a reduction in forces, which 2 of the employees said would be a violation of its collective bargaining agreement. A representative for the American Federation of Government Employees, which represents VOA, declined to comment on the record. USAGM, the Department of Government Efficiency, and the White House also did not respond to requests for comment. The expected move comes as VOA has largely remained dark since March 15th, when President Donald Trump signed an executive order calling for VOA to be eliminated to the maximum extent consistent with applicable law, along with several other agencies and offices. Trump has claimed that the network is anti-Trump and referred to it as the voice of radical America. Its employees say they have stood by their commitment to reporting nonpartisan news. Since then, a few dozen VOA staffers have returned to office, which staffers believe is an effort from USAGM senior advisor Carrie Lake, a staunch Trump ally, to maintain statutory minimums. The most recent article leading VOA's website is from March 15th. Earlier this month, Lake announced that VOA would receive content from One American News Network, a far-right pro-Trump network has propagated conspiracies around COVID-19 and the 2020 presidential election. VOA has taken the Trump administration to court in the months following the order, arguing that the agency's closure was unlawful under the First Amendment. But last week, a federal appeals court said it would not intervene in the administration's efforts to dismantle the network. The latest round of terminations could affect the ongoing litigation, but employees aren't optimistic. Even if somehow the organization can survive in some form, it would take years for our newsroom to overcome the trauma of being beaten up just for doing our job, said VOA White House Bureau Chief Patsy Widakuswara, one of the plaintiffs in the case. I don't know how we can return to our mandate to report the facts without fear or favor. So it just seems that it's dead. Just have to say goodbye to VOA. It won't return.
It's shocking. I don't think anybody ever expected this. You can sort of tell from the tone of the quotes that they've received from the employees that they've just kind of given up hope. And it's certainly looking that way. We've seen some postings on different websites and message boards in the last couple of days. Possibly there are engineering people being sent to transmitter sites such as Kuwait to dismantle things. Once that infrastructure is gone, then it's definitely not going to be back. There are apparently orders out there in place for new transmitters. Yeah. We don't know what's going to happen to that. One thing that they didn't discuss in this article either is a lot of foreign staff that were on work visas at the Voice of America may be getting sent back to their countries. And in some cases, that's going to be very dangerous for them.
Definitely. And hopefully things are not going to be too bad because, that's what is the big problem is journalists report stories sometimes and even in their own country where they are from. And some people out there could be a little mad at it. And if you return to your country, you might be in danger. And that's something that isn't taken into account at all. And it really, really should.
It's mind-boggling to think that, a station that's been around for 80 years and has been out there worldwide is just suddenly going to disappear almost overnight. We've seen other stations that have disappeared and we know what's taken its place. I would not be at all surprised that some of those frequencies are going to be grabbed up pretty quickly by Chinese state broadcasting.
Yep, if not Russian broadcasting in some form.
Yeah, that's starting up again, it seems. There's been rumbling of maybe not the Voice of Russia or the old Radio Moscow type of broadcasting starting all over again, but maybe something totally different.
So what's happening with our sun? Well, our sun had some fast solar wind this week, and it created a very strong geomagnetic storm, G3 class. It lasted almost 2 days in length, making conditions rather bad on the bands. But things are coming back to normal now. And there is a sunspot for 099 that has unstable magnetic fields that could harbor M-class solar flares. And the sunspot number 122, the solar flux 145, that's what's going to happen this week. We'll be looking at that sunspot. If things quiet down, well, conditions could be interesting. I made some amateur radio contacts, which were actually very, very nice basically across the North Pole on 20 meters at 0405 UT, which is midnight, 1 a.m. here. It was really, really a lot of fun, including one that was interesting with Ukraine. So when the conditions quiet down, they are actually very good, and it's worth tuning around. But to witness all of this, you need a radio. and you need to turn it on.
This is Margie Barrett of Lansdale, Pennsylvania, listening to the International Radio Report every Sunday morning at 10:30 on TKUT 90.3 FM Montreal.
We talked about the foreign-based reporters at Voice of America, and our next story is an audio clip discussing that precisely.
Dem senators urge Rubio to protect Voice of America foreign-based reporters. By Dominic Mastrangelo. A pair of Senate Democrats are urging Secretary of State Marco Rubio to secure the release of journalists detained while reporting overseas on behalf of taxpayer-funded media outlets like Voice of America. Citing President Trump's recent executive order scaling back funding and operations for VOA, Radio Free Europe, and other government-funded media operations, the Democratic senators wrote to Rubio they are concerned that jailed journalists affiliated with these networks risk being left behind. The lawmakers, Senator Jean Shaheen, Democrat from New Hampshire, and Chris Van Hollen, Democrat from Maryland, wrote to Rubio that they are aware of at least 5 UAGM-supported employees remaining jailed in Vietnam, 2 in Russia, 1 in Belarus, 1 in Azerbaijan, and 2 in Myanmar. We request that you with regularity use the voice of the United States to raise concern about their cases and direct relevant regional bureaus, the Bureau for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, DRL, Consular Affairs, CA, and the Office of the Special Envoy for Hostage Affairs, SPIA, to engage on their behalf where appropriate, the lawmakers wrote. We also request that you provide a plan to secure these journalists' release following grant terminations for USGM networks and its entities. The letter comes just weeks after Trump's administration announced plans to severely scale back the work of VOA, while its senior advisor, Kari Lake, has signaled plans to re-image the English-language news service as one that promotes America abroad.
So, a little bit what we were talking about, the fact that we need to protect a lot of the people that were on these stations, try to, help them and maybe keep them in the United States or prevent that they would be sent back to their own country where they could be in danger.
Yeah, some of the language services that Voice of America was using, they had brought people who spoke those languages to the United States in order to create programming. So, if governments in those countries didn't like those broadcasts going in there, they're also not going to like the reporters who were putting them together. So if they decide these visas are no longer applicable and you're going back to your country of origin, chances are the results may not be too favorable for them. Time for some good news, I guess. It sounds like a lot of doom and gloom that we're having to report these days, but we have this via Radio New Zealand. Papua New Guinea's national broadcaster moves to reintroduce shortwave radio for nationwide coverage by 2030. Papua New Guinea's National Broadcasting Corporation is aiming to reintroduce shortwave radio to achieve the government's goal of 100% broadcast coverage by 2030. This week, the state-owned broadcaster hosted a workshop on the reintroduction of shortwave radio transmissions, bringing together key government agencies and other stakeholders. NBC Managing Director Cora New said that the proposed reintroduction of shortwave radio can only be achieved through a collaborative effort. He said it is important because it ensures remote communities have access to timely news and information. NBC's Executive Director of Engineering, Saloka Lawangu, explained the importance of shortwave while making a comparison with frequency modulation, FM, shortwave, and medium wave transmission. FM is line of sight. If you see the tower, you receive the signal. If you don't see the tower, you don't receive the signal. Medium wave has a wider coverage compared to FM. Coverage for FM is more for cities and towns. When you talk about medium wave, you talk regional. When you talk about shortwave, you talk countrywide. That's why we are talking. If shortwave can do it for us with all our rugged mountains and scattered islands. The transition is timely and important for wider coverage, as it will enable broader and more reliable broadcast reach across the country's rugged terrain. NBC also believes this shift will reduce dependency on costly hardware, making maintenance and upgrades easier while ensuring improved emergency communications and public awareness. So I think a lot of people are surprised by this, that some country is making a major investment and a commitment to serving its people in a country that has a lot of remote areas, and they're deciding that the way to go is good old shortwave radio.
Well, when you're scattered all around, a bunch of little islands here and there and the ocean, shortwave is the best way. I mean, it covers everything. It will cover the whole territory easily with one transmitter. And you don't have to put tons of FM outlets, especially in mountainous areas where those FM outlets might not go very far. So it's interesting because it's, that was the idea in the past of so many broadcasters. Like in Africa, one transmitter, your coverage is the whole country.
Papua New Guinea has a fairly well-established shortwave history. In the past, there were many stations on shortwave in that part of the world, and in Papua New Guinea itself. There used to be really great DX targets for DXers out there to try and pick up some of these services. They were more like regional stations. This sounds like they want to do something sort of on a national level. So very encouraging and kind of surprising news.
So we have a few amateur radio, DXPEDITIONS, and special event stations.
Yeah, if you're looking to make contact with some pretty exotic places on the planet, ham radio is a way to do it. And we have first Tango X-Ray 5 uniform, which is in Tuamotu Archipelago, which is part of French Polynesia. And this was an update as of May the 29th. Activity of this station so far has been on 12, 15, and 17 meters CW. And it's an operator F8FKI, showing their different equipment and verticals in some photographs online. And it's in use on a place called Tikehau Island. They're going to be active until June the 9th. They're not doing any FT8, which I'm sure is going to disappoint a lot of people. So you're going to have to work at this one. They will be working in SSB and CW only.
So we have Zulu Charlie 4 prefix that will be from the UK sovereign base Cyprus. Martin MW0BRO is once again active as Zulu Charlie 4 Gulf Whiskey. Until June 9th, the operations will go on from 40 to 6 meters, and they will use CW and some SSB.
And finally, Oscar Juliet 0 in Market Reef. Diego, India Zulu 0, Echo Whiskey Juliet, informs that he will be active from Market Reef, which is part of Finland, under Finland jurisdiction, during May 31st to June the 7th, using call sign of Oscar Juliet 0 Lima. Operation will be on HF bands in 6 meters using a combination of vertical, Wyndham dipole, and Yagi antenna for 50 megahertz. Look for Diego on SSB and digital transmissions.
And we are out of time.
Thank you for tuning in today. We'll give you our contact information. We'd love to hear from our listeners out there. Our email address is radioreport@yahoo.com. You can find our show live streaming and archived at ckut.ca. Our Facebook group, we invite you to join it, International Radio Report, and our YouTube channel where our shows are stored for you to listen to at your convenience. Go to youtube.com/@IRR, and we invite you to subscribe to the channel. That does it for this week. Have a good week. We'll talk to you again next Sunday here on the International Radio Report on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal.
Have a great week, everybody.